Somewhere on YouTube right now, there's a video telling you that a machine has just beaten the most powerful telescope humanity has ever built. It says Google's quantum AI has shattered the James Webb Space Telescope. It says a hidden discovery was made, that scientists were stunned, that reality itself is being questioned. Millions of people have already watched it, and almost none of them have asked the one question that would break the entire illusion in 5 seconds. What does it actually mean for a computer chip to shatter a telescope? Sit with that for a second, because once you actually think about it, something strange happens. The sentence stops making sense, and that is exactly the point where this story gets interesting, because you are not being told about a scientific breakthrough. You are being shown how an entire ecosystem of fear, wonder, and fake authority is built, refined, and sold to you, night after night, video after video, until you stop noticing it is happening at all. Here is where it gets worse. This is not one video. This is not one channel making one mistake. This is a pattern. A machine of its own, quietly running in the background of the internet, manufacturing headlines like Google's quantum AI just outperformed the James Webb Telescope, scientists stunned, or quantum AI decoded James Webb data and what it found is a nightmare, or my personal favorite, the one that claims a classified quantum AI system analyzed a disturbing signal that nobody in the actual scientific community has ever mentioned. Read that again, classified. As if NASA and Google are secretly briefing YouTube channels with 6-figure subscriber counts before they tell the rest of the world. Think about how absurd that actually is once you say it out loud. And yet it works. It works so well that this exact headline format has been recycled, copied, and reskinned dozens of times across dozens of channels, each one dressing the same empty claim in a slightly different costume. An invisible dimension here, a Dyson sphere there, a supermassive black hole 13 billion light years away, somehow producing a signal that only a quantum computer in Mountain View, California could decode. None of it holds up. None of it is real. But that is not the story. The real story is why it doesn't need to be real to succeed, and what that tells us about the two things being weaponized against each other in these titles, the myth of quantum computing and the myth of the James Webb Telescope. Let's start with what Google's quantum AI actually is, because once you understand it, you will understand exactly how far these videos have to stretch the truth to make their headlines work. Quantum AI is Google's real, serious, well-funded research division working on quantum computing hardware and software. It is not science fiction. It is not classified. It publishes peer-reviewed papers, and its most recent achievement, a chip called Willow, was unveiled in December 2024 to genuine excitement inside the physics and computing community. Willow completed a specific benchmark calculation in under 5 minutes, a calculation that Google claims would take one of today's fastest classical supercomputers an amount of time so long it becomes almost meaningless to state in years. That is a real achievement. It matters. But here is where the myth-making machine takes something real and starts bending it into something it was never meant to be. Because immediately, notice what Google itself did not claim. Google did not say Willow can break modern encryption. Google did not say Willow can simulate the universe. Google did not say Willow has anything to do with space telescopes, deep field imaging, or cosmic signals. In fact, Google went out of its way to state clearly that Willow is nowhere near powerful enough to threaten today's cryptography, let alone rewrite astrophysics. This is a company being cautious about its own breakthrough publicly, on the record. And yet somehow, on the other side of the internet, an entirely different Google exists, one that is secretly running deep space signal analysis, one that stumbles into forbidden discoveries, one that shatters telescopes for entertainment. Think about what that gap actually represents. It is not a scientific gap. It is a trust gap, and someone is profiting from every inch of it. Now flip to the other half of the equation, the James Webb Space Telescope itself, because this is where the manipulation becomes even more obvious once you slow down and actually look at it. JWST launched in December 2021 and now orbits close to the Sun-Earth L2 point, nearly 1 million miles from Earth, far beyond where most satellites operate. It observes the universe primarily in infrared wavelengths, which lets it see through cosmic dust and peer back toward the earliest galaxies that ever formed. It does this by collecting photons, actual particles of light, physically traveling across billions of years of space and time, landing on a mirror engineered with a precision that borders on the unbelievable. That is what Webb does. It gathers light. It does not run algorithms on cosmic anomalies in the way these videos imply. It does not compute. It observes. And this is where everything changes, because once you understand that distinction, the entire premise of quantum AI shattering James Webb collapses instantly. A telescope and a quantum chip are not competitors. They are not even playing the same game. One captures ancient photons from a galaxy that existed when the universe was a fraction of its current age, while the other manipulates qubits, the strange quantum states of subatomic particles, to solve mathematical problems that classical computers struggle with. Comparing them is like claiming a camera has been outperformed by a calculator. It is not that the comparison is wrong, it is that the comparison does not exist in any meaningful sense at all. But here is the twist that makes this entire genre so effective. Nobody watching these videos is being asked to understand quantum computing or infrared astrophysics. They are being asked to feel something: awe, suspicion, the thrill of being let in on a secret the rest of the world supposedly missed. And feelings do not require logical consistency. They only require a good enough hook. This is not chaos. This is strategy. Every one of these videos follows an almost identical blueprint, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Step 1. Borrow credibility from something real. Google, quantum computing, NASA, James Webb. These are not random words. They are institutions with decades of accumulated trust. Trust that took actual scientists' actual careers to build. Step 2. Attach a shocking verb. Shattered, outperformed, decoded, uncovered, nightmare. These words are chosen not because they are accurate, but because they trigger an emotional reflex before the rational brain has time to intervene. Step 3. Imply secrecy. Classified systems, closed-door symposiums, sources that cannot be named. This tells the viewer they are special, that they are seeing something the mainstream missed, when in reality what they are seeing is content engineered specifically to feel that way. Step 4, and this is the most important one, never actually resolve the claim. Notice how none of these videos end with a clear, checkable, falsifiable fact. They end with phrases like, scientists are watching closely, or we may never know the truth, or only time will tell. That is not caution. That is an escape hatch built in from the very first sentence, so that no matter how wrong the video turns out to be, it was never technically wrong. It was just speculative. It was just asking questions. What most people are not seeing is how deliberately this format exploits the exact same psychological instincts that make you trust a real intelligence briefing. Authority, urgency, exclusivity, a sense that something important is being revealed layer by layer. The tragedy is that these are exactly the same tools that could be used to explain something true and fascinating, but instead they are pointed at something hollow, recycled, and ultimately harmless to everyone except your own understanding of how science actually works. And once you start noticing this pattern here, you start noticing it everywhere. In finance content that promises secret market signals no bank wants you to know about. In health content that promises a molecule doctors are hiding from you. In geopolitical content that promises classified leaks from unnamed insiders. The target changes. The machine underneath stays exactly the same. Now here's where the story escalates into something even more uncomfortable. Because it is not just a handful of eccentric channels doing this. Search the exact phrase behind one of these videos and you will find it copied, almost word for word, across half a dozen different accounts, each with its own thumbnail, its own dramatic narrator voice, its own slightly different framing of the same non-event. One version claims quantum AI matched new James Webb observations. Another claims it outright shattered them. A third claims the data revealed a hidden geometric structure the size of a solar system near a black hole 13 billion light years away, structured radiation patterns suggesting an artificial origin, and even a possible Dyson sphere. Think about how much narrative distance that is from Google's actual, cautious, on-the-record statement about a chip that cannot yet break basic encryption. This is not a case of one exaggeration snowballing naturally. This has the fingerprints of a template, a script formula, likely refined by AI itself, mass-produced across a small industry of channels, chasing the exact same algorithm, the exact same keywords, the exact same emotional buttons, at industrial scale. And here is the part that should genuinely unsettle you. This machine does not need to convince a scientist. It does not need peer review. It does not need to survive a single follow-up question from someone who understands basic physics. It only needs to survive the first 30 seconds of a scroll, long enough to earn a click, long enough for an algorithm somewhere to register engagement and reward it with more reach. The battlefield here is not truth versus falsehood. It is attention versus apathy, and attention, unlike truth, does not care whether the thing it is paying attention to is real. So where does that leave the actual science, the real relationship between quantum computing and astrophysics? Because there is one, and it is honestly more interesting than the fictional version once you strip away the theatrics. Quantum computing research genuinely has long-term implications for fields like cosmology and astrophysics, but not in the way these videos suggest. Quantum algorithms may eventually help physicists simulate incredibly complex systems, things like the early conditions of the universe, the behavior of matter under extreme gravity, or the statistical noise buried inside enormous astronomical datasets. Quantum sensing research could, years from now, inform the design of more sensitive detectors used in future telescopes. That is the real frontier. Not a chip staring at Webb's images and gasping in horror at some hidden dimension, but decades of patient, incremental, and glamorous research slowly narrowing the gap between two entirely different scientific disciplines. It is a story about collaboration stretched across years, not domination decided in a single afternoon. It simply does not fit into a 60-second hook, so it gets discarded in favor of something louder. And this raises the real question underneath everything, the one the fake headlines are quietly hoping you never ask. If the actual science is this compelling on its own, why does it need to be exaggerated at all? Why not tell people the true story of Willow's error correction breakthrough? A genuinely difficult problem in quantum computing that engineers have struggled with for decades, finally showing signs of scaling in the right direction. Why not tell people about the real images Webb has captured? Galaxies that existed within a few 100 million years of the Big Bang, light so old it left its source before Earth itself had fully formed. Both of these are true. Both of these are astonishing. Neither of them requires a single fabricated claim to feel enormous, and yet the manufactured version keeps winning views, which tells you something uncomfortable about the current information economy. It is not that people cannot handle complicated truths. It is that complicated truths take longer to set up, and the platforms rewarding this content are optimized for speed, not depth. Here is where the consequences start to spread beyond a single misleading video. Every time one of these videos goes viral, it does something quiet and corrosive to public trust in real science communication. It trains an audience to expect discoveries that never arrive, headlines that never resolve, breakthroughs that always dissolve the moment you look closely. And when that same audience eventually encounters a genuine scientific announcement, something real, cautious, peer-reviewed, and modest in its claims, it often fails to generate the same excitement because it does not scream nightmare or shattered or classified. Real science, by its nature, hedges. It says preliminary. It says further research is needed. It says this does not yet rule out simpler explanations. Those phrases are honest, and they are also, unfortunately, the exact opposite of what performs well in a 60-second hook. So the ecosystem quietly punishes honesty and rewards exaggeration, one video at a time, one algorithm cycle at a time, until the loudest voice in the room is rarely the most accurate one. Think about what that means for the next real discovery, whenever it comes. Somewhere, a genuine breakthrough in a quantum error correction, or a genuine anomaly in a distant galaxy's light curve, is going to surface through actual peer review, actual replication, actual scientific caution. And it is going to have to compete for attention against 10,000 fabricated headlines that got there first, dressed in the exact same words, borrowing the exact same institutional names, promising the exact same forbidden secret. How is an ordinary viewer supposed to tell the difference anymore? That is not a rhetorical flourish. That is a real structural problem. And it is only getting harder to solve as these formats get copied, refined, and in some cases, quite plausibly generated by the very AI tools these videos claim to be reporting on. So follow this all the way to its final uncomfortable edge. We are living through a moment where artificial intelligence is being used to write, narrate, and mass-produce videos about artificial intelligence, supposedly making impossible discoveries, and the audience receiving these videos has almost no reliable way to separate the performance from the substance without doing the exact kind of slow, a careful, unglamorous verification that the format itself was built to avoid. The machine is not just telling a fake story about quantum computers and telescopes. In a strange, recursive way, it is demonstrating in real time exactly how synthetic authority gets manufactured, distributed, and consumed at scale using the very technology the fake headlines pretend to be marveling at. Which leaves us with the questions nobody in these videos is actually willing to ask out loud. If a claim this obviously stretched can rack up hundreds of thousands of views without a single credible source attached to it, what happens when the next fabricated claim is subtler, better disguised, harder to disprove in 30 seconds of thought? What happens when the institutions being borrowed for credibility, Google, NASA, Harvard, the Pentagon, start pushing back publicly against having their names used this way? And does that pushback even reach the same audience that consumed the original claim? And perhaps the most uncomfortable question of all, as real quantum computers get more powerful, and real telescopes capture stranger and more genuinely unexplained signals from deep space, how will anyone know the difference between a legitimate breakthrough and the next perfectly engineered imitation of one? Because somewhere out there, right now, the next video is already being uploaded. The thumbnail is already rendered. The hook is already written. And it is waiting for exactly the kind of person who stopped asking questions after the first 10 seconds.